I'm recording this as a warning, not as a story for entertainment. I know how it sounds, but what matters to me is that you understand one simple thing. In some places, you're not a guest, you're extra. You don't belong there. My name is Anton. I'm from Estonia. I've been planning a trip to France for a long time. Not because it was a dream, and not because there were must-see places. I'd just been working a lot lately, and I wanted to change the scenery. I worked remotely, barely leaving my routine. The days were identical. I kept telling myself I'd go later, when it was more convenient, calmer, more right. And then I realized there would never be a perfect time. If I didn't leave now, nothing would change. So I bought a ticket to Paris for a couple of weeks. No expectations. Not a getaway. Not a dream vacation. Just to be in a different city, where the streets aren't familiar, and nobody expects anything from you. I wanted to walk through neighborhoods that weren't mine, sit in places where nobody knew me, be outside my normal life for a while. I landed early in the morning. I rented a tiny studio through a short-term rental service. Everything was standard. A door code, instructions about trash, a request not to make noise after 10. The apartment smelled like laundry detergent and something sweet. The first day I just walked. The river, bridges, coffee. A museum you enter because you need to enter something. Paris, on the surface, is built to make you look up. Facades, balconies, rooftops, signs. The city keeps pulling your eyes higher, like it's telling you, don't look down. There's nothing interesting at your feet. On the second day, I went to the Paris Catacombs. I'd known about them long before the trip, not from movies, not from horror stories. I once stumbled across a dry article, no pictures, no emotion. It said that under Paris there's a second city, not an idea, not a metaphor. Miles of tunnels, centuries of history, millions of human remains. At first it was limestone quarries. The city grew, and the stone for buildings, churches, and bridges came from beneath the ground. Neighborhoods appeared above, and empty cavities were left below. Eventually Paris ran into another problem. There was nowhere left for the dead. By the end of the 18th century, cemeteries were overflowing. The ground couldn't take bodies anymore. After heavy rain, graves collapsed. Coffins broke open. Bones surfaced. In 1785, the authorities made what they would later call a rational decision: move the remains underground. The transfers happened at night. Carts moved through the streets without lights. The wheels were wrapped in cloth so they wouldn't clatter. The city slept. The dead were transported without processions, without names, without goodbyes. Bones were dumped into the old quarries, down into the same underground spaces that once provided stone for Paris itself. Sometimes they were moved immediately, sometimes years later, when no one remembered the person anymore. At first they just piled the remains. Later, in the early 1800s, they started arranging them neatly, skull to skull, bone to bone, not out of respect, out of order. It made the tunnels easier to navigate. It made the walls straighter. I'd read that workers didn't stay down there for long. Not because it was physically hard, but because the place pressed on you, the weight of it. By the mid-1800s, there was an entire underground city beneath Paris, built by the living, but not for the living. People say it's easy to get lost down there. Not because it's complicated, but because it's too repetitive. Signal dies almost instantly. Sound behaves strangely. Distances feel wrong. Sometimes people come out somewhere other than where they went in. Sometimes they don't come out at all. Officially, it's explained by closed areas, confidence leaving the route. But I noticed one detail. Almost everyone who disappeared wasn't chasing thrills, and they weren't trying to scare themselves. They went out of curiosity, just to look. Paris above ground felt too polished, too staged, and down there was what the city couldn't fully hide. History without names, without inscriptions, stacked by human hands. I wasn't thinking about the supernatural. I wasn't looking for secrets. I just wanted to see a place that held history. I convinced myself it was safe. Tours, guides, a set route. I didn't understand then that some places don't exist to be visited. I bought the ticket online. My entry time was in the afternoon. Before that, I went to a store, grabbed water, wore comfortable sneakers. I brought headphones, but I didn't turn on music. For some reason, I didn't want to. There was a line at the entrance. People spoke different languages. Some laughed. Some took photos in front of the signs. It looked like a normal tourist spot. Inside, it was cool the moment you passed the checkpoint. The air feels denser, and the smell, stone and damp, like an old basement. We were gathered into a group. The guide spoke French and English. He joked, threw out numbers, dates, general facts. He smiled like someone who knows the route down to every step and could walk it with his eyes closed. Then the stairs down, long, narrow, curved walls. I counted steps to distract myself, but I lost count. My phone lost signal almost immediately. That's normal. I knew that. It's normal, until you're actually below. Down there the corridors opened up. The walls were rough, with markings and graffiti, old plaques, arrows, level indicators. The group moved in a tight line. I noticed one guy staying slightly off to the side like he didn't care. Black jacket, small backpack, a real camera, not a phone. The kind people bring when they want real footage. He wasn't filming people. He filmed the walls, the ceiling, cracks, places tourists don't usually look. I didn't think anything of it. Later, that detail came back to me over and over. We reached the first bone walls, exactly like the photos. Neat rows of skulls and bones stacked like bricks. Tourists perked up. Phones rose. Someone whispered, "Wow." Some tried to joke. The guide explained where it came from, why it was arranged like that, how the transfers happened. I listened, but my mind drifted. In places like that, you can't take it as an exhibit. You realize those aren't symbols. They were people. You can't use them as decor. But they did. What surprised me more was the silence. There were many people, but the sound felt absorbed. Voices softened. Footsteps went dull. Breathing sounded louder than usual. I caught myself walking more carefully, like I didn't want to make too much noise. The guide said it was important to stay together and not fall behind. There were closed areas, staff-only sections. It sounded like a standard script, but there was something else in his tone. Not fear, more like the habit of warning, because people ignore warnings anyway. We kept going. Narrow corridors, wider corridors, metal gates in places, with the dark passages behind them. You could see only the first few feet, then nothing. At one point the group stopped. The guide talked about inscriptions on the walls. I was near the back, and that's when I realized the guy with the camera wasn't with us anymore. He was gone, not suddenly, not like in a movie. I just glanced around, and he wasn't there. I assumed he'd moved ahead. I stepped aside for a shot. People do that on tours. Nothing dramatic. But I started logging strange things in my head. The first was sound. Sometimes I thought I heard air moving behind me. Not footsteps, not voices. Like someone slowly dragged a hand across stone, with pressure. I turned, and saw only tourists. The second was smell, not just damp stone. Sometimes there was a sharp metallic note, like a wet iron door, or like old coins. It appeared, then vanished. The third was the feeling of being watched. Not from behind, not from the side, from above. In a normal place you blame cameras, reflections. Here, above was rock. I'm not saying there was something. I'm talking about the body's reaction. Sometimes your body understands before your brain does. We reached a point where the corridor split. The official route went right. On the left was a passage behind a gate, but it wasn't solid. You could see a narrow tunnel through it. A small sign hung there, but the text was too small. French, fine print. The guide said, "You can't go there," and joked that it was not for tourists. People laughed. Someone said, "Of course." And in that moment I saw a flicker of light in the left tunnel, like someone turned a flashlight on and immediately off. Not bright, just a second. I thought, staff, security, workers. The place has to be maintained. It can't be entirely abandoned. We moved on. Bone walls gave way to plain stone. On one turn I noticed an arrow drawn in chalk, white, simple, not official. Next to it was a short word or message. I didn't read it. Dark, and everyone kept moving. A few minutes later I saw another chalk arrow, and I realized this wasn't part of the tour. I don't know who draws them. Maybe tourists. Maybe people who go down there illegally. But that idea feels different inside the catacombs. Later the guide stopped again to talk about ventilation and tunnel structure. People bunched up. And then I noticed the glow through my pocket. My phone screen was on. No signal. No internet. But the screen was on. I hadn't touched it. It was in my pocket. It was shining through fabric. I pulled it out. The camera app was open. Not maps. Not messages. Camera. I did not turn it on. I would have felt it. And even if it happened by accident, it normally turns on, and then goes dark. But it stayed on, pointed forward. I looked at the screen. I saw the group. People's backs, a stone corridor. Nothing unusual. I turned it off, put it away. Pocket misclick, I told myself. A few minutes later, the screen lit up again. I pulled it out. Camera again. But now the image wasn't what was in front of me. On the screen, bone wall, skulls, neat rows. In reality, I was standing in a plain stone corridor. I could see it with my eyes. I lowered the phone, looked around. Yes, plain stone. I raised the phone again. Skulls. I stepped to the side. The image on the screen shifted with my movement, like the camera really was filming what I was seeing. Except what I was seeing on the screen was a different place. It could have been a glitch. A frozen frame. A cached image. I tapped to switch modes. The screen instantly went normal. Stone. People. Corridor. I put the phone away and stayed closer to the middle of the group. Not because I believed in ghosts, because I didn't want to be alone. We reached a small, wider area where people could pause. A rules sign on the wall. The guide said the next section was narrow and asked everyone not to stop. That's when I saw the camera guy again. He stood a little ahead, near a turn, like nothing happened. His camera was lowered. His face looked calm, too calm. I thought, okay, he just went ahead. No big deal. But when the group started moving, he didn't move with them. He stayed at the turn. And he wasn't watching us. He was watching into a dark side passage that wasn't part of the route. I wanted to call out, "Hey, this way." But I didn't. Too awkward. Too touristy. And I didn't want to speak in that place. We passed him. I looked back. He was still there. And now he was looking at me. Not threatening. Not weird in an obvious way. Just looking. Like someone waiting for you to make your own decision. I turned away and kept walking. That was the first time I thought, there are people here who aren't tourists. After that, it got worse. Not because something supernatural jumped out. Worse because normal things stopped behaving normally. The temperature dropped. The air felt drier. Footsteps got louder. Voices got quieter. We passed a low ceiling section. Someone behind me bumped their head and cursed quietly. The guy didn't even turn around. He kept walking. The metallic smell returned. And again I heard that slow scrape, like a hand on stone. I started tracking the chalk arrows. They appeared more and more. Sometimes there were numbers, sometimes letters. I couldn't decode it. Then something happened that I can't dismiss as I imagined it. We'd been walking a long time. I don't know how long. Time down there doesn't work right. And suddenly I saw a sign I recognized. The same one from the gated left tunnel earlier. But now it was hanging on an open wall. No gate. Just rock. I didn't realize immediately. First it felt like I've seen that. Then the sick recognition. The same scratch in the corner. The same fastener shape. If it was a different sign, it was an exact copy. If it was the same one, then we had looped back. But we couldn't have. Not that fast. Not like that. I looked ahead. Everyone walked confidently. The guide said we were almost there. Nobody looked like they noticed anything wrong. I didn't want to cause a scene. I just logged it like a report, a fact I didn't want to admit. We turned again. Another chalk arrow pointed away from the official route. Under it was one word in English. I remember it because it felt wrong in that place. Home. That word made my stomach drop. Not the bones, not the dark. The word home, underground. Soon we entered a section where the walls were bones again. It was tighter. People slowed down. The guide said we were close to the exit. And then the lights flickered. Not a blackout. A flicker. Like the lamps lost power for a split second. People noticed. Someone went, "Oh." Someone laughed like it was funny. The light returned. But with the light I heard a different sound. Not voices, not footsteps. Somewhere far below, something small dropped. A pebble, then another sound. Closer, then another. Like someone was tossing small stones one by one. Testing the sound. Listening. I paused for a second. The guide kept moving. I didn't want to fall behind. So I hurried. A man in front of me, maybe in his 40s, glanced back at me like I was an inconvenience. It was normal tourist irritation. And that normality was the strangest part. We were underground, among bones and unknown tunnels, and he still cared about his personal space. That snapped reality back into place for a moment. until my phone lit up again. I pulled it out automatically. Camera. On the screen I saw us, the group, the corridor, bones along the sides. But at the far end of the frame, where there should have been darkness, there was a figure. Not a monster, not a ghost, just a person, standing in the corridor, holding something that looked like a flashlight. I lifted my head and looked behind me. No one. I looked back at the screen. The figure was still there, and it was closer than it had been. Like the camera wasn't zooming the image, but pulling reality forward. I shut the phone off. Not because that fixed anything, because I didn't want to see it. We came to a plain stone section. The ceiling got higher. Ahead was a metal door, like a service door. The guide said it was part of the system, and that we'd go up to the exit soon. I started to calm down. When your brain sees a door, it reads it as safety, a boundary, control. Back to the surface. The guide went to the door, used a key or a card. I didn't see. He opened it, and on the other side was not what I expected. I expected stairs, a service corridor, something technical. But it was another tunnel, the same kind of tunnel, just darker, and colder air pushed out of it. The guide said it was a short detour because of maintenance. People accepted it. I accepted it too, because there wasn't another option. We walked into the tunnel. A few yards in, I saw it again on the wall, in chalk, home, and an arrow pointing forward, exactly the way we were going. I didn't tell anyone. I tried to convince myself it was a stupid prank, someone writing home everywhere. But it didn't help, because if it was a prank, it was obsessive, and if it wasn't, then the question was, whose home was this? The group slowed. People asked how much longer. The guide answered briefly. No irritation, but none of the earlier tour guide ease. I saw the camera guy again. Now he was in the middle of the group, like he'd always been there. And again he watched the walls, not the people. At one point he lifted his camera and aimed it at me. Not suddenly, just raised it and held it. I instinctively turned my face away. I noticed a thin white line on his hand, chalk, and on his fingers too. I don't know if he drew the arrows. I don't know if he saw what I saw, but I know he had chalk on his hands. We reached another split. The guide turned left. At the same moment, to the right, deep in the dark, light flickered again. 1 second, and gone. I stopped. The group kept moving. Someone bumped my shoulder. I moved too. I didn't want to look right. I knew if I looked, I wouldn't be able to pretend anymore. I took another step and realized the crowd wasn't pressing behind me anymore. Footsteps disappeared. Not gradually. Just gone. I stopped. The silence became thick. So thick you can hear blood in your ears. I turned around. The corridor behind me was empty. Not I can't see anyone. Empty like nobody had been there for a long time. I stepped back. Something crunched under my shoe. Not stone. A small bone. Too thin to be part of the wall. I stepped away. I understood I wasn't on the route anymore. I went forward, toward where the group had gone. A few yards later, the corridor split. I was sure there hadn't been a split. I chose the right. A minute later, I walked into a familiar wall. A skull with a crack above the eye socket. I'd already seen it today. I couldn't have come back here. I'd been walking straight. I walked faster. The corridors started repeating. Not perfectly. Like copies with errors. A bone out of place, a missing piece, fresh dust, like something had been dragged recently. I heard a sound, soft, irregular, not footsteps, like something being pulled along the floor, trying not to make noise. I stopped. The sound stopped too. I walked. The sound moved with me, parallel. I turned into a narrow passage. The light got worse. The air got colder. The walls were bones again, but arranged differently, less careful, like nobody tried to make it neat. The smell changed. Dry. Old. I stepped into a chamber. Large. Round. Bones rose up the walls to the ceiling. All the skulls faced inward. I didn't understand at first. I understood when I took a step and felt myself being watched. I stepped back. And then I saw him. The camera guy stood near the wall. His camera was in his hands. On. A red recording light. "You're stuck too," he said. His voice was calm. Too calm. "Where's the exit?" I asked. He smiled slightly. "If I knew, you wouldn't be seeing me right now." He turned the camera, showing the chamber. "I'm filming, so I don't disappear," he said. "As long as you're filming, you're still here." "How long have you been here?" I asked. He hesitated. "I almost got out," he said. "Same as you." He looked at me carefully. "The light was there," he said, "and the door, and the people." "And?" I asked. "I turned the wrong way," he said. "Don't follow sounds, and don't follow light." "Then where do I go?" I asked. He shrugged. "Go where nothing promises an exit." Then he turned off the camera and stepped into a narrow passage where the ceiling was lower than his shoulders. I was alone again. I went where the corridor tightened, where bones ended and bare stone began. It was cold, empty. I walked for a long time, a very long time. The corridors stopped repeating, and that was worse than repetition. I started doubting whether I was moving at all. I stopped. I heard silence. Real silence. I took a step. The air changed. I didn't see the exit. I felt it. A metal staircase. Cold under my hands. I climbed, hit my shoulder, climbed again, and I came out. Night. A street. A different neighborhood. I sat on the ground and didn't stand up for a long time. A few weeks later, I was reading about the catacombs again. I came across a short note about a camera found in the 1990s. It was discovered in an illegal section. No owner. Just lying on the floor. The tape survived. On it, a man walks through tunnels and films walls. At first calmly. Then his steps speed up. The camera starts to shake. At some point, he stops filming the walls and turns the camera on himself. His breathing breaks. He speaks to someone beside him. He doesn't scream. He asks, like he's sure someone is there. Then he suddenly spins and runs. The camera falls. The recording continues for a few more seconds. An empty corridor. The sound of breathing. And then silence. They found the camera. They didn't find the man. The note had a photo attached. A dark jacket. A small backpack. A worn strap with a knot on the side. The same one. That's when I understood why he kept filming, and why he almost never looked at people. He wasn't there for the first time. He already knew the catacombs don't take you right away. First, they give you the illusion of a route, and then they make it so you stay, while the world keeps moving without you. He wasn't filming out of curiosity, not for memories. He filmed because it was the last thing proving he hadn't disappeared yet. I don't know at what point he understood he wasn't getting out. Before the recording, or during it. I only know they found the camera years later. And they didn't find him. When I came back up, the city looked too normal, too alive. People walked past, cars moved, someone laughed at a cafe. And in my head were still those even rows, turns, without meaning, and the feeling that someone was walking beside me, always half a step to the side. Some places don't wait for guests. They wait for the ones who stayed just a little longer than they should have. If you've made it this far, you're ready for the next story. It's already waiting on the channel.